Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here on this wonderfully cool but very hot first day of August. Will you please, I'm Commissioner Sonia Fisher, newly appointed Clackamas County Commissioner. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So Congressman Kurt Schrader, I have the wonderful honor of introducing him, is currently serving his 5th term in the United States House of Representatives. He represents Oregon's 5th congressional district, which includes all of Marion, Polk, Lincoln, and Tillamook counties, as well as the bulk of Clackamas and the small portions of Multnomah and Benton counties. Before being elected to Congress, he was a farmer and I almost said vegetarian, but he was a farmer and veterinarian for more than 30 years. He established and managed the Clackamas County Veterinary Clinic in Oregon City and operated his farm where he grew and sold organic fruits and vegetables. In 1996, he was elected to the Oregon House of Representatives. In 2003, he was elected to the Oregon State Senate and became chair of the Joint Ways and Means Committee. He continued to serve in that capacity until he was elected to the U.S. Congress in 2008. All of us in Clackamas County are grateful for all Congressman Schrader does to serve us. The Clackamas County Commissioners especially appreciate his leadership on finding transportation funding solutions, including congestion relief on I-205, his support for the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, and reopening the Willamette Falls Lock. His work to provide sustainable forest management that honors and protects our environment and natural resources. Please give a big Clackamas County welcome to Congressman Kurt Schrader.
Well, thank you all for coming. It's a little warm out there, and the fact you all took the time, quite a number of folks, means a lot to me. I was talking to people coming in. This is a good way for me to get a pretty good idea what is on the mind of my folks here in town. We meet with a lot of individual groups, all through the congressional session, but the town hall is a different feel of all its own, and I enjoy reaching out and getting good feedback, good, bad, or indifferent as the case may be. I'll take a couple minutes, maybe just give you an update what is really going on in Washington, D.C. It is problematic. This is not the Washington, D.C. of 6, 8, 10 months ago, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago when I first came to Congress. It's difficult. It's difficult. The administration is struggling to find its equilibrium, if I may be circumspect. It's tough. It's tough, and little chaos is going on in the White House. I don't think that's an obvious thing. I don't think anyone would argue with that. But I'll tell you this: Congress is still working. Believe it or not, it is more difficult than the previous congressional session. While a lot of folks thought we didn't do anything in the last Congress, I would remind you we passed a complete rewrite of No Child Left Behind bipartisanly. We actually did a transportation bill that'll marry up nicely, hopefully, with a transportation bill our state legislature did. We restored some of your freedoms in the Patriot Act, made sure businesses in this country can compete abroad. We actually rewrote the Toxics Act from 1970, been trying to do that for a bunch of time, and we made sure seniors can still get a doctor, because Medicare doesn't pay very well, and a lot of people are very concerned about actually getting a doctor. We increased that reimbursement. And so last Congress, not so bad, and we're not having quite that record of accomplishment so far this time. It has been difficult, a change of administration, one party controls everything. I don't know if that's really to our benefit at the end of the day, but there's still ways we can interact in there. We're trying to make the best of what's going out there. The Energy and Commerce Committee that I serve on now, with Congressman Walden, who's the chair of the committee, we put out some energy bills that are pretty, well, frankly, for the most part, all bipartisan. We did some drug reauthorizations. I actually got a bill. One of the biggest issues we've been facing is the increasing drug prices, right? Just going through the roof. A lot of price gouging by some unscrupulous folks, the Kellys of the world, who's now on trial, thank goodness. And we actually got a drug bill passed. Passed the House and has been signed by the Senate. So we're trying to get at some of the big cost-driving issues in our healthcare system. Speaking of healthcare, that has been a big topic of discussion in DC. And I think, regardless of how you feel about how it was done, and I'm open to good conversation on this, I think a lot of people, were against Obamacare, but a lot of people really like the Affordable Care Act. And they realize that, the Medicaid system, whether it's in Oregon or New Mexico or Arizona, pick a state, it's actually working pretty well. You may not like the fact, that it's a Medicaid type system. Okay, you've got a philosophy, I get that. But it's working pretty well. And the issue with healthcare isn't the tax system that made it. We actually paid for it, it's fully paid for, contrary to some of the mythology out there. And, some tough choices on how we paid for it, but I have not had any wealthy people complain to me about that little 0.9% increase in their Medicare cost or the 3.8% on their passive investments. No one's complained to me. So I'm a little concerned that some folks on the other team are dealing with entitlements and tax cuts when we really need to be talking about healthcare. And so I'll tell you a little story real quick and then we'll get to questions. So I got pissed off. That's a professional term. And said, we've gone through all these hearings and it sounds like, if I was listening closely to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, we're very worried about these premiums and deductibles are going through the roof in the individual market. And they are going up. They're going up way too high. The exact opposite of what we thought was going to happen with this balanced risk pool, thought was going to be balanced. And people are getting hurt. People are getting hurt. If you don't qualify for a subsidy, under the Affordable Care Act, or if you're not on Medicaid or Medicare, or have a good employer insurance, you're stuck on this individual market. And so I said, okay, well, I think Democrats and Republicans agree that can be fixed. And so I ran it by our leadership. They were worried about getting engaging in the conversation, all this. I said, well, this is kind of silly. People are suffering, and come October, November, the healthcare rates are final. Some have come out already, and the uncertainty that's in the system is accounting for 2/3 of the increase in most of these rates that we're seeing right now. So I'm just a little country veterinarian, but it seems to me if we put some certainty back in the system, those rates will come down. It might actually be sustainable. And so I worked with a bunch of my colleagues on my side of the aisle to start with, across the philosophical spectrum from conservative to very liberal, and talked to our leadership, talked to our ranking members, and they said, all right, what you're talking about isn't bad. It's a reinsurance, it's making sure low-income folks get cost-sharing subsidies and stuff, that individual, so there's something there to make sure people sign up for health care, and there's some state flexibility. And so we ran that up the flagpole. We got almost half the Democratic caucus to sign on to that. That was in a short period of time. That's a matter of a month or two. And big collective, okay. Who cares? Democrats aren't in control. And so I had started this Problem Solvers Caucus a few years ago, probably 3-4 years ago. Grew out of this No Labels movement. It's a good movement. You all should look at that, I think. It's about civility. It's about governance, trying to get us back to focusing on what is good for the country and respecting each other's position going forward. And so I started this group, and I'm still a member of the group, and went to the two leaders, one Republican, one Democrat, and said, well, are you guys interested in what we're talking about here? We tried to make it bipartisan. We tried not to poke anybody in the eye. The goal wasn't to cure healthcare writ large, but at least focus on this marketplace for 7% of the people that get their healthcare here, so that they get protected come this fall. That seemed like, and the insurance companies were threatening to bail on this without that certainty, some commitment from Washington, D.C. we're going to do what we said we were going to do. And I noticed that these ideas were also in all the Republican bills. It wasn't like Democrats came up with this. The Republican bills had stability fund in there. They had CSR, the cost sharing stuff for low-income folks for a little while. They did not, they were interested in the flexibility piece. So I reached out to Tom and Josh and said, hey, well, you think this is something our group would pick up? I mean, it's kind of kryptonite, talking about healthcare, you get beat up, you know, one side or the other. And they said, well, yeah, let's do that, let's try. And so, of course, when you come up with an idea, they said, Kurt, you start it. You know, you work with, in this case, Martha McSally from Arizona, and figure out what you think would be some sort of thing that both Democrats and Republicans could get behind. And we did that over the last 2.5, 3 weeks, lots of meetings, lots of talk. This problem solvers is about 43 of us, 40 plus, pretty much equally divided between Republican and Democrat. And we do that on purpose to make sure we don't get, you know, outside of, you know, that background where people can have a good conversation. And at the end of the day, this weekend, as a matter of fact, we put it out to a vote to the group, and the bar is pretty high. You have to have over 50% of the Democrats in the group and over 50% of the Republicans agree. And on top of that, 75% of the entire caucus has to agree. So it's not like 51%, it's not even the 60 vote margin the Senate operates by for the most part, it's 75%. And took a little wrangling, took a little explaining, but we got the votes on Sunday. Got the votes on Sunday. So we're moving ahead. We've gotten good feedback from Chuck Schumer, good feedback from Pelosi, good feedback from Ryan. I think McConnell's interested in trying to do something. We have reached out across the chamber walls to the Senate, and the senators, both on the Republican and Democratic side, are showing some interest. And you know how it is. The first few steps you make in your life are the ones that teach you how to make the rest of the steps. So I'm hopeful that if we can at least work on this small part of the marketplace, small but critical, that people will still have health care, we won't disenfranchise 20 million Americans, and you know, things will move forward here in the United States Congress. So stay tuned, it's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all Russia all the time. So. All right, well, let's do some questions and hopefully some answers.
All right, I have this purple box, and as you can see, I'm mixing up the numbers as to not have any bias. I'm going to pick 3. I'm going to do the first number, and then I'll let the next 2 numbers know who will be next. Okay?
Got microphones can come your way.
Okay, first, 691 311. Oh, the last 3? Okay, they're all 691s. So,
No, they're not.
they're not?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
254.
Oh no, what was the number I just read? I'm getting all mixed up. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, 691 263. And third is 691 307.
Takers. Some people come just to hear the conversation, which is cool. So you don't have to.
Okay, so 311 is here? Okay, 263? 307. All right, right
Got
here.
both these two.
Okay.
All right. Michael, if you get the other lady.
Hello, Representative.
Hey.
Schrader. I'm concerned particularly when it comes to the medical things about, I was a special education teacher, and a lot of our families in that group are marginal as far as whether they can get health care, and without some support for the government, that's vital. Besides the things that you're working on right now, what are things that we can do as citizens to encourage people to move forward?
Sure. Good question, very good question, and thank you for wanting to do something. I think this period of time in our country's history is pretty pivotal. You know, people are engaged, which is very good, and I would urge you to follow through. There's opportunities in both parties to get engaged in campaigns, to get engaged in advocacy. If there are particular issues you're concerned about, make sure I and others know about them. I'm the lead co-sponsor on a special ed bill, making sure we go to full funding, you know, hopefully at some point in time in Congress's lifetime, our lifetime, as opposed to the 14 or 15% do the full 40 plus. And there's bipartisan support for that. That's not just a Democrat thing. We've got, I think, 3 or 4 Democrats that are the lead co-sponsors, and we've got 3 or 4 Republicans. So a lot of us are tuning into that. You rallying your cohorts around the country. You go to conferences, make sure that they know there's bipartisan support for that sort of thing, and have us step up so that our precious general fund dollars can go to the rest of the education system. That's the name of the game. The feds we should be paying our fair share. We're not quite doing that. So rally folks you know, friends particularly in other states that are maybe less aware of what's going on. Ask us to step up and do the full funding. That would create a lot of opportunity, a lot of dollars to get the health care you actually need at the end of the day. Good question. Yes, dear.
Thanks for coming out tonight.
Sure.
I'm interested in universal health care, and I want to know what you think about that and what you're hearing in Washington about that.
Sure. Well, with the problems we're having with the Affordable Care Act replacement stuff that we're seeing in Congress, people are trying to figure out where do we go. There's not a lot of discussion right now on the universal health care. We tried that in 2009, 2010. I think it has legs. I'm hearing more and more about it from both Democrats and Republicans, to be frank. I don't know if this is exactly the right time. People's tempers are pretty tight. Maybe if we can fix some of the problems with the Affordable Care Act in this individual marketplace, again, then maybe that discussion gets bigger and broader. Make sure that we have the funds, to be able to do that, what it would take, do some study. Make sure that low-income Medicaid folks are taken care of, because right now they don't have any co-pays or premiums to have to deal with. But there's those that move up the spectrum, from 138% of poverty level on up to that 400 or 500% of poverty level, from what's that, 16,000 or so up to 90, 95,000 as individuals that are going to need some help. And the system now is very bureaucratic, lots of administration. I talked to doctors. I had a doctor earlier today at the Milwaukee Rotary. I was here earlier today, and she was saying it's just a nightmare to fill out all these forms and follow what's going on. And she said even getting her own health care was difficult for her to understand. Here's a professional that's in the field and with a lot of education. So that may be coming sooner than we think. There's a lot of details to be worked out, and sometimes it's getting people to realize, just like we did with the Affordable Care Act, where people thought it was all terrible, and now they realize, well, there's some pretty good stuff in there. So maybe it'll be one of the iterations we get to, hopefully, in the near future. Yeah. I think we need new, I'm sorry.
Thanks again for coming out. And first, I just want to piggyback onto this lady's question to let you know how important I think, and I think many of us think, universal single-payer healthcare is. And I would like the Democrats to get a little more on top of being worrying less about timing and more about keep going with it. Repetition sometimes makes a lot happen.
That's true.
So I think healthcare is still a mess, and I see that you guys are really trying, and I applaud your efforts to try to work bipartisanly. But this administration, which I don't really feel is one that I certainly didn't vote for it, and I'm not even sure that it's legitimate, is now dismantling the government. Like, the biggest thing for me, the Environmental Protection Agency
Sure.
is almost dismantled, and here we are with just horrible temperatures, and the world is kind of going to hell in a handbasket. At the same time, the people across the aisle are complaining about not only Medicare, but Medicare, but also tax reform. And I can't say I trust these people. I'm hoping you could give us your ideas about what seems to be the next ball that they want to roll, which is tax reform, and how you can protect us.
Sure.
Wealthy people need to pay more taxes. They have the money, they need to pay it.
Well, and I don't think I'm getting much pushback from wealthy Americans or wealthy Oregonians. They are not adverse to paying their fair share. In the course of my short tenure here in Congress, we've looked at different ways to help with the tax code. Way back in the Bull Simpson era, Dave Camp did one before he left Congress. And I had a lot of seniors that were well off say, I don't need Social Security. I don't need some of these things. I can afford this on my own, and that's a credit to a lot of Americans out there. So I think there's an opportunity to fight through that and make sure it works for everybody. The tax reform, I think one of the key things for me is it's got to be not just the big international corporations. It's got to be small businesses and you and I. Tax reform should be good for everybody. We actually had, one of the groups I belong to, we had a series of tax reform hearings where we had different groups, advocacy groups, unions, business, the whole 9 yards come in and talk to us about what they were interested in. And they were all pretty much on the same page. We needed tax reform, which was good. You don't usually get that unanimity in Congress. But they were also pretty sure that they were mostly in favor of it if they didn't lose their tax break. And that became a problem because there was very little you could do. And I think, as you guys probably know, out of the $3 trillion we're supposed to collect in revenue to balance our budget, we give away $1 trillion in tax breaks. And some are very good, and some are, we like. But it's a lot of money to give away, and that, we could lower our rates dramatically if you had courage enough to get rid of all of those. There are going to be winners and losers, right here in this room, and businesses like mine, my veterinary clinic. So it's going to require some soul searching going forward. It's going to be tough. I think the hue and outcry that you guys have had, and lots of folks around the country, not just citizens, but even some of the bigger businesses in our state and around the country, have objected to the current plan that Paul Ryan and Kevin Brady have put out. As you probably have read, they've given up on their border adjustment tax, which would have caused huge price increases, I think, for a lot of consumers in this country. It was well-intentioned. I don't malign what they're trying to do, but it would have been really difficult for businesses and consumers to deal with that in any, I think, real rational manner, given the way the tax code works in our state, in our country, and frankly overseas. So that will be probably the next effort. They are looking, unfortunately, in my opinion, to do it through reconciliation. Just was reading an article by Mitch McConnell where he reads some Democrat principles and dismisses them out of hand and says we're going to go to reconciliation. That's not the way to do it. That's not the way to do it. We're learning with the Affordable Care Act that if one team tries to push something through, no matter how good you think it is, how much good it's done, it causes a lot of problems, and it's not necessarily sustainable. So I'm hopeful that calmer heads will prevail. Kevin Brady is a pretty good guy. He's open to listening, I think, to some semblance of rational discussion on this thing, and I've got good Republicans as well as lots of Democrats that are not going to let corporations alone get the benefit of any tax reform. So our attention will be on that. Keep your advocacy, though. That helps me. That helps me a lot.
Okay, first, I need these. 254499. Next, 691287. And last, 691308.
My question, Kurt, is about House Resolution 676, the Expanded and Improved Medicare for All Act. Recent polls show that 60% of Americans support Medicare for all. This act would provide all individuals legally residing in the U.S. with free health care that includes all medical necessary care, including dental, vision, and mental health care. It suggests methods of financing the program, which include increasing the personal income tax on the top 5% of earners. It would institute increased tax on capital gains, and it would institute a tax on stock and bond transactions. Representatives DeFazio, Blumenauer, and Bonamici have co-sponsored House Resolution 676. Why are you the only one of Oregon's Democrat House delegation who has not done so?
Good, fair question, fair question. Well, we've read the bill and looked at it pretty closely, and much like I talked about a moment ago, we have to work out the details of this sort of thing. Medicare for all, nice idea, a good idea. However, if you're low income, you can't afford the 20% copay. So we've got to figure that out. How do we take care of these folks that currently have Medicaid? or frankly with the ACA, they get a better deal than they do on Medicare. So we got to figure that out. Medicare itself, as you guys know, is in trouble financially. Right now, 40% of our regular tax dollars go to support it. Medicare no longer supports itself. So we got to figure that out. We've got to come up with plans to do that. California looked at it very recently. Vermont looked at it. Vermont decided they couldn't do it quite yet. California came up with I think a $400 billion price tag, which is twice their state budget right now, to do it in their state. So we've got to work through that. I don't want to mislead you guys that that's something that we could do here overnight. That's just not going to happen. We are not, Democrats are not in charge. We ran up that hill back in 2009 and 2010. Doesn't mean that times have changed. I mentioned that before, times have changed. Maybe there's an opportunity as elections go forward, as we work through this healthcare discussion to do that. But I don't want to mislead folks that that's going to happen anytime soon. There's real important details to figure out, protecting most vulnerable people and making sure that we can pay for that at the end of the day. That's the answer. Well, and in the back.
I appreciate everything you've always done for public education, specifically career and technical education. But as I asked the last time you had a town hall, there's still a lot of teachers who are concerned about our students being taken from classrooms, being taken outside of the schools and watching their parents be chosen indiscriminately to be hauled off. And as a teacher going into school once again this fall, what can you do to help us as educators, not only in our state but across the nation, to make sure that our children who come into our classrooms are protected and don't ever have to worry about losing their parents?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're trying to move forward on that front. It is difficult. This administration does not share our viewpoint on that, I'm afraid. But we're pushing back. A lot of cities, a lot of states are pushing back. Our state is a leader in this arena. We're supporting a bill, we're a co-sponsor of the bill to prevent Trump or anyone else from taking actions against sanctuary cities, where we're trying to do the right thing for a lot of people, for goodness sakes. I'm supporting the Gutierrez bill. I'm on the Gutierrez bill to make sure that the DACA students have access to jobs and education in this country. They're brought to this country through no fault of their own. They should have the same opportunities every person in this country should have. So, and there's other bills like this that we're working on, trying to create a different dynamic to support what you guys are doing in education all the time, which is, frankly, give the kids the best opportunity that they can to move forward. I'm from, most of us in this room are from immigrant families at some point in our career. And while we all like to think maybe it's legal, I'm not so sure we're all legally here, at the end of the day. And a lot of folks come here for a better life. And I'd argue that the diversity, and this is something I see all the time, the diversity we have in this country sometimes becomes something that divides us. And I don't get that. I mean, when I watch the Olympics, I like to watch the American team because you can't tell where these people come from. They're all over our country, and they're from all walks of life and all ethnicities, and stuff. I think that's wonderful, and we can learn so much from one another. I'm getting older, and the older I get, the more I don't know, if you know what I mean. And I like to think that folks like you all and people from Texas or Alabama, okay, man, I'm going to listen. They got elected same as I did, and we've got to work this out going forward. So hopefully they'll start to listen. I think the important thing is to advocate this in the election. I'm a strong supporter of comprehensive immigration reform. We'll continue to do so. In the back. He's got the microphone for you here.
Our Supreme Court has spoken again and again in favor of freedom of speech, and most recently in Citizens United.
Hold it up. Hold the mic up just a little.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's right.
I was speaking of freedom of speech, which the Supreme Court has supported again and again, spoken very strongly in support of that.
Sure.
I understand that recently you have helped to support a bill, or you've actually sponsored a bill to outlaw boycotting Israel. And I would like you to speak and tell us why your policies on Israel are more important than Americans' right to freedom of speech.
Fair question. I guess I didn't look at the bill through that prism. My goal was to make sure that our friends and allies are supported, and that people that have a different point of view feel free to express that. But I didn't want our country or other countries that where it's fashionable to condemn Israel, which is the only democracy in the Middle East, just because they disagree with some of their policies. I don't agree with all their policies. I don't agree with all of the United States of America's policies either. But I don't think we should have a situation where our country is singled out and boycotted because a lot of these other countries just don't agree with their philosophy. That's not the essence of the UN. It's supposed to be, you know, a organization that supports one another. So I went at it through that prism. If there are civil rights, you know, freedom of speech issues, I'm open to addressing them. I'm open to addressing them. But I don't want children on campuses around this country being persecuted because they're Jewish. No, it is actually happening, unfortunately. People are misinterpreting things. So I'm willing to look at the one aspect of that, and I'll take a look, but I'm still supportive of every religion in this country, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, you name it.
Can you please tell me what's the bill actually say that you're supporting?
I don't remember the number. Maybe the gentleman has the number.
1697, HR 1697. So can you tell me what it's about that you're supporting it? I'm ethnically Jewish, so I would like to know why you have a problem with people boycotting Israel. Yes. They were put there where the Palestinians were already.
Well, we agree to disagree on that.
How is it different from apartheid South Africa? We boycotted South Africa.
I just said I wanted to know why he had a problem with people boycotting it. Next question, please.
Okay, are we ready?
I have relatives who died in the Holocaust. I just wanted to know.
Okay. 691-288, 691-279, and 691-297.
Young lady? Two? Okay. All right. I think the young lady too, right? Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Sure.
I'm concerned about our Earth and the EPA. I'm concerned that we're seeing a weakening of the EPA. And there was recently a House bill that was called Poison Our Waters Act. That's not the official name.
Okay.
But it was dubbed Poison Our Waters Act because it allows spraying without the regular, it allows more spraying without so much permitting. It was House Bill.
Oh, you're talking about the FIFRA bill, probably.
I have it here. At any rate, you voted for it. And I'm concerned because I'm concerned for our Earth.
Sure, sure. It was, if I remember correctly, it was a bill to repeal one of the Obama regulations to have two different agencies, EPA and the Department of Ag, regulate pesticide usage and herbicide usage along streams. And it seemed to me that that was redundant and probably not someplace we want to go. We have a lot of folks here in agriculture in our state, mostly family farms, and they try and do the right thing. And it is costly to comply with all the regulatory framework we've got out there. So we've been trying to figure out, when is one regulation maybe too much when we already got it covered. I've worked hard to make sure that EPA is fully funded, fight that all the time, make sure Land and Conservation Water Fund, I voted to make that permanent. All these, there's a lot of attacks on the EPA right now. The head of the EPA is frankly not a big believer in the EPA. So we're gonna have to watch that very, very closely. I guess the good news I would say, especially on the funding side of things, is that while the Republicans at this point can do reconciliation, i.e. pass a bill with just 50-some votes now in the Senate, they can only do it once a year. One they're using up on their health care attempt, and the other they're going to use on tax reform. So appropriations bills that actually spend your hard-earned tax dollars, they have to go through the regular process and require, on the Senate side, that means 60 votes. So I'm hopeful that while some things may pass in the House, for the most part, we'll be able to defend it.
Were you an organic farmer?
Yes, still am actually. My
Thank you.
son's growing organic hops right now. Please buy his hops. No, I don't mean that. I get in trouble, right? Dang it. On second thought, don't buy his hops. No one in this room buys hops. Serious.
Apparently this bill makes us unaware of toxic chemicals that are sprayed over the waterways and into the lakes, and so I'm concerned about that.
Fair enough. And this lady right next to you, Michael.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I grew up in Canby, probably not far from your farm.
Small town.
Yeah. So thanks for taking my question, and I wanted to ask about, I'm anxious about the attacks on the LGBTQ community, and specifically the most recent tweets about the transgender ban that kind of came out of nowhere. Specifically, the Texas Representative Pete Olson has introduced H.R. 2796, which is called the Civil Rights Uniformity Act, but it doesn't have the words gender and sex, so it's not being interpreted for protecting gender identity. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on this issue and what you're doing to help protect the LGBTQ and transgender community.
Sure. Well, we've got a 100% voting record with basic rights and HRC. We strongly believe that everyone should have equal rights. I don't care who you are at all. And we will continue to push that. The good news on this crazy tweet, this one tweet by the president is that, the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, no, we're not going to do this. We got to go through regular policy channels, all this. So you just can't make stuff up in 140 characters and run this country. And I think that's a travesty. So anyway, we're with you. We'll continue to make that good fight. And I'd like to think, frankly, that's actually a bipartisan issue also, for the most part. There are some people in the Deep South that have a different view of things. I get that. But they're not all like that. And I think your generation is going to lead the way. We're going to keep the fight in the defensive battle. Hopefully you'll take offensive battle.
Thank you.
Not a new subject, but it needs to be addressed. And that is the universal health care single payer.
Right.
Some facts and figures to look at. 34 out of 35 of the richest countries in the world have it. Guess who doesn't? Why? And we don't have the best health care in the world either. So, okay. Before the Affordable Care Act, the cost to administer health care was 22 cents out of every health care dollar.
That's right.
And where does that go? To health care? No. To health insurance companies. With the Affordable Care Act, that came down to 20.5 cents.
And even less than that for some.
Yes. Medicare is delivered at 3 cents out of every healthcare dollar. We need to do some serious thinking, and not just, as long as healthcare is governed essentially by health insurance, which is not health care.
Good point. That's fair. I agree. Well, I think there's been way too much, and this whole discussion on healthcare, your last point is very salient, where we're focusing on insurance and all this stuff, and we lose sight of the fact that the goal is to have healthy people. People want to make short-term decisions. Well, why can't I just get a catastrophic plan? I'm a guy, I'm not going to need maternity care, all this. Well, the system is built, ideally, so that everyone benefits from everyone paying into the system. That's the way insurance works, whether your car or your house or whatever. And you can't pick and choose, otherwise you couldn't get insurance. Washington State tried to do it without requiring people to get health care, and no insurer would insure in their state. New York had the same experience. So, I'm a little, to be honest with you guys, a little bit of a libertarian. I don't like people telling me what to do. I'm an American. But I also don't like people mooching off of my high healthcare premiums because they don't want to get their own, and yet they're going to get taken care of when they go to the hospital. So we've got to figure that out. We've got to figure that out. And I think that the opportunity to do so, the Affordable Care Act is, like I've said, maybe baby steps in that direction about getting costs down. The work I'm doing right now to try and get some support for the basic tenets that everyone should have health care, that's not even a given. Now, I forget, there's like 13 plus states that didn't do the Medicaid expansion. And what does that tell you? I mean, it's 100% paid by the federal government to start with, goes down to 90%. Yeah, the state's got to pony up 10%. But I'll tell you, when I was co-chair of Ways and Means, helped run the budget for the state of Oregon a few years ago, I'd have jumped at the chance to get the feds to put in 90% and us at the state only have to come up with 10. That's a good deal, man. That's a good deal. But there are a lot of states that are not doing that. And our state is actually focused on health for individuals. We do this coordinated care at the Medicaid level, Oregon Health Plan, where if you walk in and you're sick, take care of not just your sick, but they know you got bad teeth, they'll make sure you get a dentist. That maybe your family life isn't so good, they'll make sure you get a little assistance if you want it. No one's forced to do this, if you want it. And these are all locally grown things. This is not from Washington, D.C. Now, I've talked to a bunch of these healthcare organizations around our state, and they're all grassroots. It works in Eastern Oregon, works in Southern Oregon, works in downtown Portland, and works here in our valley and on the coast. And there's ways to emphasize health, and I think that's gotten lost in the debate. We have to get back to looking at health. Our goal is to provide good health to everybody, not come up with a scheme to manipulate insurance or pay-fors or all that sort of thing. Good point, very good point.
All right, our next three, 254-556, 691-286, and 691-291.
Over there. And over there.
Representative Schrader, I'm concerned about the proposed defunding of a lot of science, research, as well as the arts. What are you proposing be done about continuing the proper funding of those? We are a nation of innovators, and that would crush the science industry.
Absolutely. Well, the president has proposed some pretty huge cuts in research and science in a variety of different budgets. NOAA, which is very close and dear to us here on the coast, where we're on the Pacific coast. We face these storms, these potential tsunamis. Ocean acidification is going on. It's real. We see it every day. I live that nightmare when I go to the coast and talk to my oyster farmers and my fishing friends. It's very difficult. No one in Congress supports defunding research or the arts. As you've seen, saw in the 2017 budget that we did pass, that some of the proposals, frankly, all the proposals that the president had come up with were thrown out. No one paid attention to them. We actually had and it's bipartisan. We've been at this for a long time. The appropriations, the budgeting committees, there's 12 of them, they work pretty well together. There's a lot, historically, it's been a very bipartisan group, and they have come up with some pretty good policies. And the arts also supported. I think you're going to see, even in some of the House Republican, what they call minibus, because it can't get a budget passed, they're going to try and do bits and pieces, that a lot of that stuff will be restored at the end of the day. And I'll say this, to your point on innovation, there's a lot cheaper labor in other parts of the world. And with cheap labor, you get cheap products, to be honest with you. And people are starting to wake up to the fact that top quality manufacturing is still done in this country, still done in our state, still provides good family wage jobs. But that technology comes from innovation, comes from science, driving people to the high quality stuff that we can excel in as American men and women, working men and women. So I'm a big supporter. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I was just wondering, how can I start the process of getting rid of the Electorial College? And the reason why we've obviously had some missed opportunities there. So.
I think it's going to take an amendment, obviously, to the Constitution to pursue that. I would urge you to get support. Line up folks that work with colleagues and friends across the country. There's a lot of interest in that at this point in time. I'm willing to go whatever America wants to go on that. I think that's fine. So I'm actually introducing an amendment every session to get rid of Citizens United, because I think that's also a travesty. But we've got to get support around the country for that, to make that happen. So it's going to take a lot of legwork, but I think you've got a lot of colleagues. I've talked to my friends in Congress, and there's a lot of interest in doing that. You have one? Up front here? Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. In follow-up to that question about the Electoral College, I agree that would be a very heavy lift right now, especially given the breakdown of Congress, but I'm trying to look for ways to do things that we can reach for and to spring into action instead of just being horrified with the daily deluge of things that are in jeopardy and going away. So focusing on what we want instead of what we don't want. I think that voter registration by motor voter registration is working really well in Oregon. I think we're a great example to the country. Also voting by mail. And so with the administration's election fraud commission, I'm just wondering what sorts of things we can do either through legislation or as citizens to try to push for better access for voters across the country by eliminating barriers to access.
Sure. Good for you. Yeah, I think in Oregon, again, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, you're a little bit shocked at this, in my opinion, blatant attempt to curb people's ability to vote. I mean, I'm old enough to remember well, I don't remember, I was a baby, but the poll tax stuff. Remember back in the day, some of you, there was these taxes put on so that poor people couldn't vote. And mostly African American, it was a way to discriminate against people. We're kind of back to that. You know, you got to bring this ID or that ID, or, you know, and frankly, a lot of people, a lot of senior citizens don't have all that information anymore. You know, we have a society that's made up of well-to-do people, middle-income folks, and folks that are struggling to get by. And those folks don't have all this stuff in a nice little card box and all that. They're working to get by. Should they be disenfranchised because of that? No. So I've signed on to a bill with John Lewis, an icon of the civil rights movement, to restore voting rights in this country, to make sure that states are held accountable for some of their patent disregard for that. You should, that's good, this question makes me feel good, or I'm on the right track. And you know, we need to be doing more of that. I would talk to friends of yours, again, around this state, and frankly, other states. You know, there are others that are not feeling quite the same way. John Lewis is a huge, you know, presence in the United States Congress, very revered, but this is going to be a tough climb, your delegation, all of us try and talk up vote by mail, to make sure people, you know, especially if you're older, it's a day like this, and you know, get into the voting place is a little tough, that you can actually vote. You can sit down and take time, read through all the issues. We in Oregon have lots of ballot measures to read through, and vote, you know, thoughtfully. I think that's a wonderful thing, rather than trying to remember all this junk as you go into a voting booth and, you know, that sort of thing. So I hope that that will be picked up. We're slowly but surely chipping away at their allegations. Oh, it's, you know, full of fraud or could be fraudulent. No, not at all. We've had very good success. There's always going to be a one-off person, but frankly, it's been a solid system. And I was very pleased as a person that's been in public service a little bit now to see. I thought, oh, motor voter, that's a great idea, but you know, a lot of people aren't going to vote. A lot of people, unaffiliated, voted in this last election cycle. That's cool. I think that's great. So hopefully more of that will happen, and you're on the right track. Please keep advocating for that.
Just one more comment, if I might. It seems that the power of the governors on certain bipartisan issues, like the healthcare issue, is something that we could really harness.
That's a good point. Use the governors. There's a lot of bipartisanship with different governor groups to, you know, deal with some of these issues, whether it's healthcare, voting rights, that sort of thing. I think that's a very good point. Very good point. Very good. Next one's, I guess.
All right, we have 691-267, 691-274 and 254-521.
Hi, Congressman Schrader. My name is Sarah Kaufman. I work for the Alzheimer's Association.
Oh, wow. Great.
And I'm here with my parents, Mike and Cheryl Totten. Better?
Yes.
All right. So I don't have so much as a question, just more of a comment. I wanted to thank you for everything you've done in your years in Congress to support the work that we do at the Alzheimer's Association. Most recently, with your support, the House passed an increase of $400 additional million at the National Institutes of Health for Alzheimer's disease research. And that will go a long way to change the trajectory of this disease. It's the most expensive disease in the nation.
It is.
The bulk of the dollars are felt by Medicare and Medicaid. We'll probably spend about $259 billion this year on Alzheimer's disease. So thank you for all you do to support research efforts at the National Institutes of Health.
Sure, sure. Pleased to do that, and thank you for your work and your advocacy. People say, oh, no one pays attention to me, but I get visited by groups like yours. I hear stories. My own father, frankly, near the end, I think had a little bit of an Alzheimer issue. We were lucky to be in a situation to be able to handle that with our family and some help, but not everyone has that. And there's some great comments on research and development now. There's some cool genetic stuff that we may be able to help some cases this way. I think the future is actually pretty bright if we invest in it. If we invest in it, the future is pretty bright to cure a lot of these diseases, break through the genetic codes that are causing many of them, and frankly, some of the environmental problems that are causing some of these too. So we're getting smarter as we go forward, and again, it's something that we were able to get some good bipartisan support for. So thank you for doing that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Congressman. I too don't have so much a question as a comment. I want to thank you and your staff, especially Michael, for your support of me in my attempt to get my interpreter from Afghanistan here in the United States. We talked about immigration, but we are leaving our friends behind. These gentlemen took the same risks, more risks than we took. They had to go back to their home. And in 2006, I left an interpreter behind. And thank you, Michael, for helping.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, we take that pretty serious in our office. Michael served our country, and we're huge proponents to make sure our veterans and men and women that helped our country get the help they deserve. As you remember earlier this year, there was a freeze on hiring, which would have applied to the VA. Yours truly and some others objected strongly. And again, thanks to a lot of your guys' comments, the VA stopped that. The Secretary of the VA said, well, it's not going to apply to us. We're going to go ahead and hire people anyway to make sure our men and women get the benefits that they deserve. And then there was a caregiver program, as you may have heard, where folks, which is good. I mean, Oregon has a storied tradition with Oregon Project Independence, where you can live and get care at home. It's a lot cheaper, and frankly, it's better. As a veterinarian, my animals always did better, getting better at home, and I think that's true for humans as well. And the VA in Oregon was kicking 50% of the people off this program for virtually no reason we could tell. And the average removal rate in other states, ideally you're getting better, was like 5 or 6%. So we raised a stink over that, and we found out South Carolina was having the same problem we did. And again, thanks to people coming to us with real stories, we stopped it. They stopped kicking people out of getting this critical health care at their home by their loved ones. And they're coming back with hopefully a new revamped program as we speak. But that's the type of stuff that y'all do make a difference. You speak up, and we try. We can't help everyone all the time. Sometimes it doesn't work out. I'm not going to mislead you. We can, work miracles. But Michael takes his job super duper serious and tries to do the right thing for everyone that comes in that door. Everyone's gonna listen. That's good.
Okay, these are the last 3 tickets. We have 254-503, 254-514, and 691-321.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm Sherry Palmer from West Lynn. I grew up in Halfway in Castle Rock, Washington. I'm a country girl, and as you know, you can't take the country out of a country girl. So public lands mean a great deal to me. And I have witnessed over the last 40 years the increase in fees, the national park fees, the Northwest Forest Pass, and now the new fees in Central Oregon. I don't mind that because the Republicans are defunding our public lands. And I feel as a citizen, I need to step up. But there are other users of our public lands. Have you worked with the Cattlemen's Association to see that their grazing fees increase at the rate that the fees are on families with children?
Well, good comment, good comment. I've worked with a number of different organizations that take a benefit of grazing and or working on our public lands. And I'm a strong proponent they should pay their fair share. There have been market studies done showing that they're getting a pretty sweet deal. So I think I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. And I've raised that with our friends. I also think that we should, if good management of those lands is important, and if we get them to help keep our public lands in good shape, I'm fine with that. But they have to abide by the rules and pay their fair share. I mean, that's just common sense. Just common sense. Yes, in the back.
Thank you, Congressman Schrader. Mark Meek here, but this question is a proxy question from Milwaukee City Mayor Gamba. He has a city council meeting tonight, and his question is, given that climate change is the biggest threat to humanity in general, what are you specifically doing to help solve the problem? And for example, will you sign on to Senator Jeff Merkley's 100 by 50 bill? And do you think what you are doing is sufficient given the magnitude of the problem?
Sure. Well, it is a huge problem. Probably one of, if not the most important thing that our country is facing. We're witnessing it today, right? A little bit, we're gonna have it this week. It's not the Oregon I grew up in. It's a very different climate that we're seeing. I alluded to the oceans are a mess. I think that's a big problem with our salmon, frankly. We're seeing it in our shellfish industry. We're seeing the waste that's pooling out there. And the change in climate patterns across the United States. There are those, as you know, still in Congress who don't believe it's happening. As a farmer, and as a veterinarian, I think science is overwhelming in this area. It's straightforward. We need to be working on that. I objected strongly. I voted for a resolution that stated that we're upset with the president for pulling out the Paris Accords. That's wrong. With all the problems our ocean has already, every year, your West Coast delegation, for the most part, supports a bill that would prevent oil and gas drilling in the Western Pacific Ocean. That's just not right. It's in danger already. And we try and get behind what I think is a great fund paid for by oil and gas drilling called the Land and Water Conservation Fund. This supports a lot of our parks, a lot of our opportunities out there on our public lands, and trying to get that to be a permanent, not something you have to reauthorize every few years, because it gets reauthorized. It has bipartisan support. So we need to do more of that. Frankly, it's going to be a tough lift, given this current administration does not share those views. But again, good news is this reconciliation process that they can bypass the 60 votes in the Senate with can only be used twice, once each year, if you will. And like I said earlier, they've used it. So all this other stuff has to go through the appropriations process or other bills that they may be able to get through the House because they got a big majority. I hope to change that, no offense to my Republican colleagues. But to get through the Senate, they can't get through the Senate. They actually have to come to some accommodation. So continue to talk to me, Jeff, Senator Merkley, Senator Wyden. Make sure they know what your interest is, and they're great supporters. Up front here.
Hi, my name is
is Taylor, and I wanted to bring up something that never seems to come up at these town halls, and that's the issue of student loans. My friends and I graduated in 2010 during the recession, and none of us could find jobs, so we took unpaid internships, and I worked in retail. I had 5 unpaid internships, and then I went to graduate school, and I didn't have any money, I just graduated from college and took a bunch of loans out for that. And so a federal loan had an interest rate of 7%. So, yeah. So then I finally, got my master's degree and went to public service. I work at the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization. And, now I'm basically paying 2 mortgages, one on my actual house and one on my student loans. And no one, of course the goal, would be free college for everybody, but I'm not asking for that. I just want to know what you're going to do to help us afford college.
Sure. Good for you. Well, I just can't believe the perseverance you've shown. Despite the adversity of this horrible predicament where a lot of folks can't afford school. We expect everyone to go to school, provide that opportunity, and yet they can't afford to do it. That's crazy. What type of country do we live in? Healthcare should be a right for all, so should an education for the best and brightest of our country. I'm actually co-sponsoring the bill to allow you guys to refinance your loans. The fact they're not allowed, I don't know if you all know this, they are not really allowed to refinance their federal loans to get a lower rate, get one of those 3 or 4% rates, because some people in Congress, not me, some people in Congress feel, that's going to cost the government money because we won't get as much money from these hard students that are suffering. Isn't that baloney? But that's the only reason, because we allowed everyone to refinance, right? We can refinance our car, our house, whatever, but they can't refinance their student loans. So it's a travesty. We're pushing that. You should come to my town halls, other town halls, get friends of yours in different states, talk to all the different, right now our country needs everyone at a call to action. And means coming to these things, which are sometimes tough, but also means talking to your friends and neighbors and your family in other parts of the country that aren't quite as tuned into what your problems are. Oregon's got a much better, I think, delegation and people that understand it. If not everyone's succeeding, we're failing. And the goal is to make everybody do well. And it's a travesty. I just can't believe, I'm a veterinarian, I talk to a lot of vet students these days, graduate with $150,000, $250,000 in debt. Like you said, a mortgage without a house. It's just unconscionable that we would allow that to happen because we don't want to, quote, unbalance the budget. We shouldn't balance the budget on your back, darling. It should be on, ours. Well, I guess that's it for tonight, but thank you all for coming. I've got another one in Salem. If you didn't get your question answered tonight, drive down the road. There's no eclipse this week, and you'll probably get back in time. But thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.